and welcome to Take 10 on Tuesdays with the Tennessee Tribune. We have a special guest today, a Nashville native, Reginald Stuart, who is a recruiting consultant for the McClatchy newspaper company. McClatchy has 30 newspapers, a number of weekly newspapers, and segmented newspapers as well. And Reggie, who I've known for many years, so I called him Reggie, does the recruiting for many of these newspapers. Before that, he was the consultant and did recruiting for the Knight Ridder Company, which owned 33 newspapers at its peak. Before it dissolved in 2005.
Right.
I think it dissolved. So, welcome,
Thank you.
Reginald. We're happy to have you here.
Good to
And
be
we
here.
want to congratulate you on the award that you have received from the Associated Press Managing Editors Association, the Bob Magruder Award for Diversity Leadership, and especially your work in recruiting.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, you're a native Nashvilleian, and you went to Tennessee State
Right.
here, and then how did you get into the newspaper business? Has this always been a passion?
Well, I've been in newspaper business since I was about 10 or 11. I had a newspaper in the neighborhood
Really?
as an elementary school student,
Mm-hmm.
and I was editor of the high school newspaper. Back in the days when we had 8.5 by 11 sheets and you printed on a mimeograph machine.
Oh, wow.
And then I took a break in college and then came back after college in search for a job. And in search for a job meant that you were going to go to a newspaper. Because I went to several places, a bank,
Mm-hmm.
what was going to become a credit card company called MasterCard and Visa Card.
I'm familiar with that.
And so I eventually wound up at the Tennessee, and they remembered me from my childhood and said, he's got a little spark, we may hire him. And they did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they took a gamble on a unknown product and just no experience, but a lot of spark and desire to learn to do it, and succeeded.
Mm-hmm. And how long were you at the Tennessean?
A year and a half.
A year. Oh, and then what?
Yeah.
Where did you go?
Oh, I went to WSIX TV, which is now WKRN,
Mm-hmm.
which is the ABC station here. And then I went back and freelanced again for a couple of years. I went to graduate school and came back, freelanced some more, and then I went to the New York Times and off and around.
Okay. Then how did you get into recruiting? Recruiting for newsrooms has always been tough. I always thought it was tough.
Well, recruiting came about because they realized that I was not able to get to the fires before the fire trucks left. The adage about being a reporter is you get to the fires before the fire trucks arrive at the scene.
That's right.
Once they start noticing that you get the fire truck after the fire truck leaves the scene, it's over, right?
Mm.
Then they move you up in the hierarchy to do other jobs. And so I became a recruiter by virtue of the fact that they had enough of me as a writer, enough of me as a reporter and an editor, and they needed my talents to help them recruit new talent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that on a whim to try it out, and it turned out that it was something we both found I was very good at doing, and the rest is history. I've been doing it for 20 years plus.
For more than 20 years.
Yeah.
And I know when you were with Knight Ridder, because we had contact often talking about
Right.
potential candidates, that you especially focused on young minority
Right.
candidates and bringing them into the business and making sure they had an opportunity. And not only bringing them in, but one of the things that you did that I always admired, you also were concerned about their retention.
Oh yeah, yeah. Hiring people is one thing, but keeping them in the business is totally something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's a higher calling, it's a tougher job, and so you have to counsel people along the way and make sure they're focused, they're still energetic, they're still interested, that the papers are still interested in the person.
Mm-hmm.
Because we find that people will quit jobs, the first reason, not because of money, because they're not happy in the job. They quit their boss.
Ah.
And so I work very hard to get people into publications, in the newsrooms, where they're good bosses,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure the bosses continue to nurture that person's development until they're on their own.
And you're recruiting young people straight out of college, from their first job?
From their first job, out of college, career changers,
Mm-hmm. Oh.
if they're doing something and it looks like they want to be a journalist, right? But they're out doing some totally different job. I want to talk to them about their interest and where their passion is. And if they say, "Well, I can't write," I said, "Well, let's do a couple samples," and they actually can write, right? And so I try to lure them into the newspaper because it's a good business. It still is a noble business. Doesn't pay a lot of money, as you know. But
yes, I do.
It's a noble business, and we're able to help people and help improve society all very long.
And you make a good point, because I still love newspapers. I have a long career in newspapers as well, and I still think it's a very good business. But you often hear people say, "Well, newspapers are dinosaurs. Newspapers are dying." Why don't you feel that way?
Because I don't believe it.
Why?
I think the written word is still the prevailing way of communicating, in spite of the emergence of social media, the emergence of television, radio, computers, you name it. At the end of the day, the written word is still king. And as long as we have an ability to command the written word well, are able to articulate our thoughts well, then we'll have some legit chair at the table of decision making. We'll be able to influence society. We'll be able to inform society. We'll be able to help understand complicated and difficult issues and put it in a way that everybody can understand them. It's only because you can read, only because you can write. And so, because the written word in my mind is still king, right? I'll stick with written word.
Okay. All right. I like that, because I absolutely agree with you. So where do we see the gaps? Where
You're one
are
of the few people in the world who does. Go ahead.
that agree? I know. I mean, people tell me all the time, I don't know why you still promote newspapers. But, I think the written word is critical.
Yeah.
And it is the way that we have to get
when
the
you go
message
down to the
across.
courthouse to sell land or buy something, you go down to the courthouse to get married, you go down to the courthouse to do anything, go to the health department, right? Go to the school board, right? Everything they're doing is based on a written document.
Right.
And so you have to keep that in mind. You can be as hip as school as you want to. At the end of the day, everything is to be based on what's on the record. And so you have to be able to prepare a record, to keep a record, and don't let people lose track of what belongs on the record.
Right. So where are the gaps today? When you're recruiting today, where are you looking for people? What aspect, what part of the business do we still need minorities to go into?
We'll see minorities in newspapers, in television, in radio.
But what area, in all those are the broad areas, but very specifically, are we seeing enough minorities covering the technology field? Are there enough minorities covering health?
No, the basic thing is there are not enough minorities covering anything.
Okay.
And so you have to work from that premise that there are not enough covering anything. The population is growing, and so the need for more people to cover these things is greater and growing also. And there just are not enough people of color who are covering any aspect of this, these topics. You name it, go down the list. Education, health, technology, welfare, government policy, courts, street paving.
Street paving?
Yeah,
Okay.
environmental protection, sanitation. We're not covering these topics. And so there's always an opportunity, if you have spark and desire, opportunity to take these topics, write about them, and do very well writing about them.
Okay.
And the whole idea is, are you going to write something that's going to inform the public? And is there a need for the public to be informed about things? Yes, that's obvious. The question is, who's going to do the job?
Right.
If we don't, why not? You know, why not us? People may ask, well, why do you think you can do this? Well, because you aren't, so I might as well do it myself.
Right. And where do you see, you bring a workshop every year to Nashville at the John Sigenthaler.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me just a little bit about that.
That's the Chip Squin Fellows Program. And the Chip Squin Program was started by Al Newharth, the late founder of the larger GoodNet operation
Right.
in USA Today. And,
Which also owns the Tennessee.
Yeah, and a partner in that was John Quinn, one of the early partners with Al Newhart in getting GoodNet into its current orbit. John Siegenthaler, locally, who hired me. And so the CHIPS Quinn program attempts to find talented young people of color who want careers in journalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to give them basic boot camps and get you ready in a fast track to go into a newsroom as a rookie, take on your first job, and not go bust.
Mm-hmm.
And they do that by bringing in people who are up to speed in all the technical skills of journalism, right? Who are up to speed in ethics, up to speed in writing, up to speed in reporting skills, basic reporting skills. Can teach a lot in 8 weeks, 6 weeks, 4 weeks. But they get you started, and they get you planted, and they get you instilled with some basic values in being a journalist. And they remind you that you're getting started. You know, so the little pay you make today should not be a discouraging aspect of pursuing a career in journalism. It's just a starting point.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Reggie, for joining us today. We appreciate it. And thank you for joining us. We hope you've learned a lot through our interview with Reggie Stuart, who's been awarded a diversity award for his work in recruiting young people for newspapers.